Members of a small religious sect gather for prayer, Bible readings or Holy Communion. They're a Christian congregation of simple, God-fearing folk.
Very nice people and very, very sincere. People who I think are very genuine in what they believe and what they want to do.
These are the exclusive brethren. They believe they're chosen by God, and they long for the rapture, when the saints on earth will be separated from the rest.
The rapture is a teaching that there will be a time when all of those who are Christian and alive at a particular time will be swept up into the next life, and left behind will be those who are not pure.
Members of this sect are forbidden to vote or to socialize with those outside the fellowship. But quietly, brethren have campaigned hard in elections, supporting conservative parties and family values. Tonight, Four Corners opens the doors on the brethren, revealing the burden placed on those inside the sect and the price extracted from those who leave.
You still keep those letters?
I do. I just love to see their handwriting.
Folded away from the public's gaze in Australia, the exclusive brethren live their daily lives by the scriptures. They say the Bible tells them to separate themselves from evil. Separation, they say, is as old as time itself. The scriptures from beginning to end teach separation.
They're a group that take very seriously the need to withdraw from the world and to keep from being tainted with the world.
The Brethren claim 40,000 members worldwide, around half of whom live in Australia and New Zealand. The world leader is a Sydney accountant called Bruce Hales. He's known as the Man of God, or the elect vessel.
The Man of God is very much a figure of substantial power because he is the ultimate authority on the interpretation of Scripture within the group and plays that role.
Brethren families take their lead from the Man of God. They won't send their children to university, and television, radio, personal computers and mobile phones are forbidden. In common with other fundamentalist Christian groups, the Brethren practice excommunication. Anyone who defies the universal leader risks being excommunicated.
By disagreeing with the Man of God, you may indeed be engaging in a kind of deviance within the group that the group can't tolerate. And that's what excommunication is about.
Brethren are banned from voting by their leaders. That, though, hasn't stopped the Church from campaigning in elections in several different countries, focusing on family values and a conservative agenda.
They've claimed that it's only been individual members, but the material that these individual members have produced in the political arena has been very similar in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, even in the USA.
As the Brethren have become politically more visible, Four Corners has been approached by former members concerned that the real story of the sect's family values isn't being told.
Get out of here, I'll boot the whole thing over.
Four Corners set out to uncover that story, but it wasn't easy. The Brethren wouldn't be interviewed, and their attitude to being filmed is hostile, as we discovered when we were quietly filming in a public Perth street.
We just realised that you're a camera crew, so we're just giving you crap. Okay. So who called you up here? Who called you up here? You opposers?
Are you supporters?
Supporters of what?
Hey, just by the way, I'll just warn you in 5 minutes, if you don't get off...
Have you got a fear of the government of God?
Are you believers?
You're threatening us?
We are not threatening you.
Are you believers?
We are not threatening you. You are threatening us.
No, we're not threatening you.
Yes, you are.
What are you doing here, you poor cunt?
Yes, you are. Do you believe in God? Do you believe in God?
Get a real job.
Yes, I do. I do believe in God.
Waste your fuel, mate. Poor cunts.
The Brethren's leaders wouldn't appear on this program, nor would they allow any families within the church to be filmed or interviewed. Former Brethren say you need to know the history of the movement in order to understand it now. The exclusive Brethren sect has its roots in 19th century Dublin, where a new fundamentalist Protestant movement was born. Its leader was an aristocratic clergyman, J.N. Darby.
It came about in Ireland in the 1800s with John Darby particularly, who decided that they wanted to study the Bible and take things more seriously, with an emphasis on the evil of the world and separating from the world, to live with a greater dedication for God.
Its members were known early on as the Plymouth Brethren, but soon there were two distinct breakaway groups, the Open Brethren and the more hardline Exclusives. Joy Nason grew up in a Brethren household in post-war England.
In the early days, I didn't think it was anything very abnormal.
Was it good? Was it a loving, close community?
Yes.
When she was 10, her father decided they should emigrate to Australia. But like many girls growing up in a society that was becoming freer, she felt hemmed in.
We were much better off and had much more comfortable family life. But things started to change. Things started to get more strict, and I started to feel embarrassed about belonging to this group of brethren.
Embarrassed for what reason?
Because I wasn't allowed to go to the pictures, for instance. We didn't have radio. And I started to feel different.
Then, as now, women and girls in the church were expected to be subservient to their husbands and fathers.
I'll never forget later on, when I was a young married woman, the Brethren coming to me and suggesting that I should only speak 1/10 of what my husband did.
In New Zealand, Nairi Thomas also grew up in a Brethren family.
It wasn't really until I started school that I realised I was different. And even then, way back over 60 years ago, it wasn't probably so much different to a basic fundamentalist Christian family.
The end of the 1950s proved a turning point in Brethren history. American Big Jim Taylor, who'd taken over the leadership from his father James Taylor Sr., told his fellow Brethren that they had to separate completely from the outside world. From then on, Brethren families weren't allowed to socialise or even eat with anyone outside the movement. That included close relatives.
Prior to the 60s, we were able to see grandparents and uncles and aunties who were on the outside. And we used to really cherish those times when we could see those members of the family. But after the early 60s, when what they call the eating issue came along, when we weren't allowed to eat or drink or socialise with other people, that became very, very hard on our relatives.
It meant that we as a family had to sever our links with relations who weren't amongst the Brethren, because my father wasn't born amongst the Brethren, he was a Baptist. So that was traumatic.
Huge heartbreak. I mean, wives directed in meetings not to go back to their spouse who was not with the Brethren. It was just a time of complete devastation for families, just ripped apart.
The 1960s brought other changes. The man of God was fond of a drop of whiskey and expected his fellow Brethren to drink it too.
Even though the Brethren would not admit this, he was an alcoholic. I can remember being instructed to provide whiskey at meal times when we had visitors, and we had visitors very often. I can remember being forced to drink whiskey because if I didn't, I was hiding something.
other eccentric rules were introduced.
There's a